133. The Chase. First Day. That night, in the mid-watch, when the old man, as his wont at intervals, stepped forth from the scuttle in which he leaned, and went to his pivot-hole, he suddenly thrust out his face fiercely, snuffing up the sea air as a sagacious ship's dog will, and drawing nigh to some barbarous isle. He declared that a whale must be near. Soon that peculiar odor, sometimes to a great distance given forth by the living sperm whale, was palpable to all the watch. Nor was any mariner surprised when, after inspecting the compass, and then the dog vane, and then ascertaining the precise bearing of the odor as nearly as possible, Ahab rapidly ordered the ship's course to be slightly altered and the sail to be shortened. The acute policy dictating these movements was sufficiently vindicated at daybreak by the sight of a long sleek on the sea directly and lengthwise ahead, smooth as oil and resembling in the pleated watery wrinkles bordering it the polished metallic-like marks of some swift tide rip at the mouth of a deep rapid stream. "Man the mastheads! Call all hands!" Thundering with the butts of 3 clubbed handspikes in the forecastle deck, Daggoo roused the sleepers with such judgment claps that they seemed to exhale from the scuttle, so instantaneously did they appear with their clothes in hands. "What do you see?" cried Ahab, flattening his face to the sky. "Nothing, nothing, sir," was the sound hailing down in reply. "T'gallant sails, stunsails, alow and aloft on both sides." All sail being set, he now cast loose the lifeline reserved for swaying him to the main royal masthead, and in a few moments they were hoisting him thither, when, while but 2/3 of the way aloft, and while peering ahead through the horizontal vacancy between the main topsail and the topgallant sail, he raised a gull-like cry in the air. "There she blows! There she blows! A hump like a snow hill! It's Moby Dick!" Fired by the cry, which seemed simultaneously taken up by the 3 lookouts, the men on deck rushed to the rigging to behold the famous whale they had so long been pursuing. Ahab had now gained his final perch, some feet above the other lookouts, Tashtego standing just beneath him on the cap of the topgallant mast, so that the Indian's head was almost on a level with Ahab's heel. From this height the whale was now seen some mile or so ahead, at every roll of the sea revealing his high, sparkling hump, and regularly jetting his silent spout into the air. To the credulous mariners it seemed the same silent spout they had so long ago beheld in the moonlit Atlantic and Indian Oceans. "And did none of ye see it before?" cried Ahab, hailing the perched men all around him. "I saw him almost at the same instant that Captain Ahab did, and I cried out," said Tashtego. "Not the same instant, not the same. No, the doubloon is mine. Fate reserved the doubloon for me. I only. None of ye could have raised the white whale first. There she blows! There she blows! There she blows! There again, he cried in long, lingering, methodic tones, attuned to the gradual prolongings of the whale's visible jets. "He's going to sound. And stunsails, down the topgallant sails. Stand by with 3 boats. Mr. Starbuck, remember, stay on board and keep the ship. Helm there, luff a point. So steady, man, steady. There go the flukes. Oh no, only black water. Already the boats there? Stand by, stand by. Lower me, Mr. Starbuck, lower, lower, quicker." And he slid through the air to the deck. "He's heading straight to the leeward, sir," cried Stubb, "right away from us. He could not have seen the ship yet. Be dumb, man. Stand by the braces. Hard down the helm. Brace up. Shiver her. Shiver her. So well that. Boats. Boats." Soon all the boats but Starbuck's were dropped, all the boat sails set, all the paddles plying with rippling swiftness, shooting to the leeward. Ahab heading the onset. A pale death glimmer lit up Fedallah's sunken eyes, a hideous motion gnawed his mouth. Like noiseless nautilus shells, their light prows sped through the sea, but only slowly they neared the foe. As they neared, the ocean grew still more smooth, seemed drawing a carpet over its waves, seemed a noon meadow, so serenely it spread. At length, the breathless hunter came so nigh his seemingly unsuspecting prey that his entire dazzling hump was distinctly visible, sliding alongside the sea as if an isolated thing, and continually set in a revolving ring of finest fleecy greenish foam. He saw the vast involving wrinkles of the slightly projecting head beyond. Before it, Far out on the soft Turkish-rugged waters went the glistening white shadow from his broad, milky forehead, a musical ripple playfully accompanying the shade, and behind, the blue waters interchangeably flowed over into the moving valley of his steady wake. On either hand, bright bubbles arose and danced by his side, but these were broken again by the light toes of 100 gay fowls softly feathering the sea, alternate with the fitful flight, and like to some flagstaff rising from the painted hull of an argosy. A tall but shattered pole of a recent lance projected from the white whale's back, and at intervals one of the cloud soft-toed fowls hovering, and to and fro skimming like a canopy over the fish, silently perched and rocked on his pole, the long tail feathers streaming like pennons. A gentle joyfulness, a mighty mildness of repose and swiftness, invested the gliding whale. Not the white bull Jupiter swimming away with the ravished Europa clinging to his graceful horns, his lovely leering eyes sideways intent upon the maid, with smooth bewitching fleetness rippling straight for the nuptial bower in Crete. Not Jove, not that great majesty supreme did surpass the glorified white whale as he so divinely swam. On each soft side, coincident with the parted swell, that but once leaving him, then flowed so wide away. On each bright side the whale shed off enticings. No wonder there had been some among the hunters who, namelessly transported and allured by all this serenity, had ventured to assail it, but had fatally found that quietude but the vesture of tornadoes. Yet calm, enticing calm, O whale, thou glidest on to all who for the first time eye thee, no matter how many in that same way thou mayest have bejuggled and destroyed before. And thus, through the serene tranquillities of the tropical sea, among waves whose hand-clappings were suspended by exceeding rapture, Moby Dick moved on, still withholding from sight the full terrors of his submerged trunk, entirely hiding the wrenched hideousness of his jaw. But soon the forepart of him slowly rose from the water. For an instant his whole marbleized body formed a high arch, like Virginia's natural bridge, and warningly waved his bannered flukes in the air. The grand god revealed himself, sounded, and went out of sight. Hoveringly halting and dipping on the wing, the white seafowls longingly lingered over the agitated pool that he left. With oars apeak and paddles down, the sheets of their sails adrift, the three boats stilly floated, awaiting Moby Dick's reappearance. "An hour," said Ahab, standing rooted in his boat's stern as he gazed upon the whale's place, toward the dim blue spaces and wide wooing vacancies to the leeward. It was only an instant, for again his eyes seemed whirling round in his head as he swept the watery circle. The breeze now freshened, the sea began to swell. The birds, cried Teshtigo, in long Indian file as when herons take wing. The white birds were now all flying towards Ahab's boat, and when within a few yards began fluttering over the water there, wheeling round and round with joyous, expectant cries. Their vision was keener than man's. Ahab could discover no sign in the sea. But suddenly, as he peered down and down into its depths, he profoundly saw a white spot no bigger than a whale vessel, a white weasel, with wonderfully sheer celerity uprising and magnifying as it rose, till it turned, and then there were plainly revealed two long, crooked rows of white glistening teeth floating up from the indiscoverable bottom. It was Moby Dick's open mouth and scrolled jaw, his vast shadowed bulk still half blending with the blue of the sea. The glittering mouth yawned beneath the boat like an open-doored marble tomb, and giving one sidelong sweep with his steering oar, Ahab whirled the craft aside from this tremendous apparition. Then, calling upon Fedallah to change places with him, went forward to the bows, and seizing Perth's harpoon, commanded his crew to gasp their oars and stand by to stern. Now, by reason of this timely spinning round the boat upon its axis, its bow by anticipation was made to face the whale's head, while yet under water. But as if perceived this stratagem, Moby Dick, with that malicious intelligence ascribed to him, sidelingly transported himself, as it were, in an instant, shooting his pleated head lengthwise beneath the boat. Through every plank and each rib, it thrilled for an instant. the whale obliquely lying on its back in the manner of a biting shark, slowly and feelingly taking its bows full within its mouth, so that the long, narrow, scrolled lower jaw curled high up into the open air, and one of the teeth caught in a rowlock. The bluish pearl white of the inside of the jaw was within 6 inches of Ahab's head, and reached higher than that. In this attitude, the white whale now shook the slight cedar as a mildly cruel cat her mouse. With unastonished eyes, Fedallah gazed and crossed his arms, but the tiger-yellow crew were tumbling over each other's heads to gain the uttermost stern. And now, while both elastic gunwales were springing in and out as the whale dallied with the doomed craft in this devilish way, and from his body being submerged beneath the boat, he could not be darted at from the bows, for the bows were almost inside of him, as it were, and while the other boats involuntarily paused as before a quick crisis impossible to withstand. Then it was that monomaniac Ahab, furious with this tantalizing vicinity of his foe, which placed him alive and helpless in the very jaws he hated. Frenzied with all of this, he seized the long bone with his naked hands and wildly strove to wrench it from its gripe. And now he thus vainly strove, the jaw slipped from him, and the frail gunwales bent in, collapsed, and snapped, as both jaws, like an enormous shears sliding further aft, bit the craft completely in twain, and locked themselves fast again in the sea, midway between the two floating wrecks. These floated aside, the broken ends drooping, the crew at the stern wreck clinging to the gunwales, and striving to hold fast to the oars and lash them across. At that preluding moment, ere the boat was yet snapped, Ahab, the first to perceive the whale's intent, by the crafty upraising of his head, a movement that loosed his hold for the time. At that moment his hand made but one final effort to push the boat out of the bight, but only slipping further into the whale's mouth and tilting over sideways as it slipped. The boat had shaken off his hold on the jaw, spilled him out of it, as he leaned into the push, so that he fell flat-faced upon the sea. Ripplingly withdrawing from his prey, Moby Dick now lay at a little distance, vertically thrusting his oblong whale head up and down in the billows, at the same time slowly revolving his whole spindled body, so that when his vast wrinkled forehead rose some 20 or more feet out of the water, now the now rising swells with their confluent waves dazzlingly broke against it, vindictively tossing their shivered spray still higher into the air. So in a gale, the but half-baffled channel billows only recoil from the base of the Eddystone, triumphantly to overlap its summit with their scud. This motion is particular to the sperm whale. It receives its designation, pitch-poling, from it being likened to that preliminary up and down poise at the whale lance in the exercise called pitch-poling previously described. By this motion, the whale must be best and most comprehensively view whatever objects may be encircling him. But soon, resuming his horizontal attitude, Moby Dick swam swiftly round and round the wrecked crew, sideways churning the water in his vengeful wake, as if lashing himself to still another and more deadly assault. The sight of the splintered boat seemed to madden him, as the blood of grapes and mulberries cast before Antiochus's elephants in the book of Maccabees. Meanwhile, Ahab, half smothered in the foam of the whale's insolent tail, and too much of a cripple to swim, though he could still keep afloat even in the heart of such a whirlpool as that, helpless Ahab's head was seen like a tossed bubble, at which the least chance shock might burst. From the boat's fragmentary stern, Fedallah incongruously mildly eyed him. The clinging crew at the other end could not succor him. More than enough was it for them to look to themselves. For it was revolvingly appalling was the white whale's aspect, and so planetarily swift did the ever-contracting circles he make, that he seemed horizontally swooping upon them. And though the other boats, unharmed, still hovered hard by, still dared not to pull into the eddy to strike, lest they should be the signal for the instant destruction of the jeopardized castaways, Ahab and all. Nor, in that case, could they themselves hope to escape. With straining eyes, then, they remained on the outer edge of the direful zone, whose center had now become the old man's head. Meantime, from the beginning, all this had been descried from the ship's mastheads, and, squaring her yard, she had borne down upon the scene, and was now so nigh that Ahab in the water hailed her. "Sail on the—" But at that moment a breaking sea dashed him from the Moby Dick, and whelmed him for the time. But struggling out of it again, and chancing to rise on a towering crest, he shouted, "Sail on the whale! Drive him off!" The Pequod's prows were pointed, and breaking up the charmed circle, she effectually parted the white whale from his victim. As he sullenly swam off, the boats flew to the rescue. Dragged into Stubb's boat with bloodshot, blinded eyes, the white brine caking in his wrinkles, the long tension of Ahab's bodily strength did crack, and helplessly he yielded to his body's doom, for a time lying all crushed in the bottom of Stubb's boat, like one trodden under the foot of herds of elephants. Far inland, nameless wails came from him, as desolate sounds from out ravines. But this intensity of his physical prostration did but so much the more abbreviate it. In an instant's compass, great hearts sometimes condense to one deep pang, the sum total of those shallow pains kindly diffused through the feebler men's whole lives. And so, such hearts, though summary in each one still suffering, still, if the gods decree it in their lifetime aggregate whole age of woe, wholly made up of instantaneous intensities, for even in their pointless centers these noble natures contain the entire circumferences of inferior souls. "The harpoon," said Ahab, halfway rising, and draggingly leaning on one bended arm. "Is it safe?" "Aye, sir, for it was not darted." "This is it," said Stubb, showing it. "Lay it before me. Any missing men?" "1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were 5 oars, sir, and here are 5 men." "That's good. Help me, man. I wish to stand." So, I see him again. There, going off to the leeward still. What a leaping spout. "Hands off from me." The eternal sap runs up in Ahab's bones again. "Set the sail, out oars, the helm." It is often the case that when a boat is stove, its crew, being picked up by another boat, help to work the second boat, and the chase is thus continued with what is called double-banked oars. It was thus now, but the added power of the boat did not equal the added power of the whale, for he seemed to have triple-banked his every fin, swimming with a velocity which plainly showed that if now, under these circumstances, pushed on, the chase would prove indefinitely prolonged, if not a hopeless one. Nor could any crew endure for so long a period such an unintermitted, intense straining at the oar, a thing barely tolerable only in some brief vicissitude. The ship itself then, as it sometimes happened, offered the most promising intermediate means of overtaking the chase. Accordingly, the boats now made for her, and were soon swayed up upon their cranes, the 2 parts of the wrecked boat having been previously secured by her, and then hoisting everything to her side and stacking her canvas high up and sideways outstretching with stunsails, like the double-jointed wings of an albatross, the Pequod bore down on the leeward wake of Moby Dick. At the well-known methodic intervals, the whale's glittering spout was regularly announced from the manned mastheads, and when he would be reported as just gone down, Ahab would take the time, then pacing the deck, binnacle watch in hand, so soon as the last second of the allotted hour expired, his voice was heard. "Whose is the doubloon now? D'ye see 'em?" And if the reply was, "No, sir," straightway he commanded them to lift him to his perch. In this way the day wore on, Ahab now aloft and motionless, anon unresting, pacing the planks. As he was thus walking, uttering no sound except to hail the men aloft, or to bid them hoist a sail still higher, or to spread one to a greater breadth, thus to and fro pacing beneath his slouched hat, at every turn he passed his own wrecked boat, which had been dropped upon the quarter-deck, and lay there reversed, broken bow to shattered stern. At last he paused before it, and as in an entirely overclouded sky fresh troops of clouds will sometimes sail across, so over the old man's face there now stole some such added gloom as this. Stubb saw him pause, and perhaps intending, not vainly though, to evince his own unabated fortitude, and thus keep up a valiant place in the captain's mind. He advanced, and, eyeing the wreck, examined. "The thistle the ass refused. It pricked his mouth too keenly, sir. Ha ha! What soulless thing is this that laughs before a wreck? Man, man, did I not know thee brave as fearless fire, and as mechanical? I could swear that word about troon, groan nor laugh shall be heard before a wreck. Ay, sir, said Starbuck, drawing near, 'tis a solemn sight, an omen and an ill one. Omen? Omen? The dictionary. If the gods think to speak outright to a man, they will honorably speak outright, not shake their heads and give old wives darkling hint. Begone, ye two, the opposite poles of one thing. Starbuck is Stubb reversed, and Stubb is Starbuck, and ye two are all mankind, and Ahab stands alone among the millions of peopled earth, nor gods, nor men, nor neighbors. Cold, cold I shiver. How now, aloft there, do you see him? Sing out for every spout, though he spout 10 times a second. The day was nearly done, only the hem of his golden robe was rustling. Soon it was almost dark, but the lookout men still remained unset. Can't see the spout now, sir, too dark, cried a voice from the air. How heading when last seen? As before, straight to the leeward. Good, he will travel slower, now 'tis night. Down royals and topgallant and stunsails, Mr. Starbuck. We must not run over him before morning. He's making a passage now, and may heave to for a while. Helm there, keep her full before the wind. Aloft, come down, Mr. Stubb, send a fresh hand to the foremast head, and see it manned till morning. Then, advancing toward the doubloon and the mainmast, men, this gold is mine, for I earned it, but I shall let it abide here till the whale is dead, and then, whoever of ye first raises him upon that day, he shall be killed. This gold is that man's, and if on that day I shall raise him again, then 10 times its sum shall be divided among all of ye. Away now, the deck is thine, sir. And so saying, he placed himself halfway within the scuttle, and slouching his hat, stood there till dawn, except when at intervals, rousing himself to see how the night wore on. This is the end of chapter 133. Now, there are 135 chapters, so this is 3 before the end. There's also an afterward summary. So there's the first sighting of the whale, comes at a chapter 133. And here you have Moby Dick swimming peacefully along. And it's described as how tranquil the sea is around him, how quiet he is, how smoothly he swims. And the Pequod comes up upon him and lowers boats. And they start charging. And then he dives. And Ahab's like, okay, he's going to be down for an hour. No, he's not down for an hour. He's down just long enough to get some depth so he can come straight up at him. And he picks Ahab's boat, probably because it's in the front. And, or you could argue he picks Ahab's boat because it's Ahab's boat. And the two of them, are linked, and this whole, sort of symbiosis of them trying to kill each other. They're kind of linked. And so Moby Dick comes straight up, and Ahab sees him and backs off a little bit. So it's like, yeah, I see what you're doing there. He backs off a little bit so he can, stab him as soon as he comes up. But then Moby Dick turns, and he comes up jaw first, somewhat upside down. Now, as described before, sperm whales, massive head, and this little jaw hanging down beneath, or big jaw actually, hanging down beneath. And then it's like flat on the bottom. So you have this massive head, which is a big, beautiful target. But then you have this little jaw. And so because he's coming in upside down, you have this little jaw that comes up out of the surface and goes ka-chunk down on the boat. So the jaw bites the boat, bites the bow of the boat, the front of the boat, and pulls it down, snaps it off, and everybody runs to the stern. And Ahab is like, it's just the jaw. I can't get a good target. I can't get a good target. He's like, get off the boat. Starts pushing Moby Dick off of the boat, even though, it's like he's right there. But Ahab can't get a good target. And so the boat gets wrecked. And then Moby Dick starts circling. And Stubb and Flask are like, I don't know what to do. Because they're like, if we attack Moby Dick, then he's going to turn on Ahab right then and there and swallow him whole. And we don't want the captain to be swallowed, though. thinking about that might be the best of all possible outcomes in this case. But, so Moby Dick starts circling, and Stubb and Flask are like, well, we can't get a good shot. And, we can't get a good stab at it. He's going to get the captain. And the Pequod comes in. And so the Pequod makes for Moby Dick, and Moby Dick's like, yeah, this isn't going to work out well. It starts swimming off. And so they have the boats double oared, because, they have 3 crews and 2 boats. So, there's extra people. And they're rowing as fast as they can, but Moby Dick's like, watch this. It just takes off. And they're like, we'll never catch him. So they go back to the Pequod, get back in the Pequod, and the Pequod sets full sails. And then it sets up extra sails off to the side. So we talked about this before with, they set these off riggers, and so it's even more sail. Just this insane amount of sail trying to catch up Moby Dick. And so the Pequod, with all of this sail, could just barely keep up. And it goes night. And they're like, okay, we'll take down the extra sail. Moby Dick might get a little bit ahead of us, but at least we won't run over him, because if they end up running over him, then, he'll be behind them. And he might not swim towards them, even though Moby Dick apparently has someplace to go. But, he might not swim towards the Pequod, though. With the monster, nobody knows, because, they're so unprecedented. And finally, you have this scene at the end where you have Stubb and Starbuck looking at the wreckage of Ahab's boat. And Stubb makes a joke, because Stubb makes jokes. And, it's kind of a whistling by the graveyard thing. It's like, oh well, boat gone. And Ahab's like, don't make a joke. This is something deadly serious. And then you have Starbuck on the other side. Oh, this is an omen, a grave warning. It's, Ahab is like, no, you're both wrong. This is a terrible thing. This is a wrecked boat. But, you're looking at wrongly from opposite sides, and you guys are like mirror images of each other. And I'm the only one who sees this as this is a wrecked boat, and this is just a bad thing. And, so Stubb treated it too lightly. Starbuck treated it too seriously. And Ahab is like, no, this is just a bad thing. And, we will consider the boat and fix the boat, but just deal with the realities here.